Next lesson in speech is called Introduction to Perception. Our objective is to define perception and compare its three stages. Let's look at our vocabulary words. An act or process of closing something is closure. The concept that people or messages that are close to one another belong to one another is proximity. Something that arouses feeling or thought is stimulus. The plural is stimuli. Based on a person's opinions or feelings rather than facts is subjective. Okay, today we're going to talk about introduction to perception. Go ahead and skip a space in your notes. Go ahead and write today's date. Introduction to perception. Have you ever listened to two friends tell a story about an experience they encountered together? Often they won't agree entirely upon the details of the experience. Why does this happen? Each views the events through his or her own pair of glasses. These lenses form their perception of reality. It's the same for all of us. All that we are and have experienced comes into play as we view the world around us. Understanding perception. Past experience and perception. Our past experiences, both known to us and in our subconscious, affect how we react to the next experience. Those experiences are influential enough to make the three questions important ones to ask when we consider how we view the world. Do I trust people? Am I familiar with the events that are unfolding before me? Or are these new experiences entirely? The last time I experienced a similar circumstance, was it a positive or a negative experience? Let's take a look at a common experience to watch how two friends, Jamie and Sarah, react to each other based upon their backgrounds or personal histories. Jamie hangs up the phone. She's frustrated. Her close friend Sarah has made other plans for the weekend. Now Sarah doesn't want to go with her to the new mall opening this weekend. This doesn't make sense to Jamie. She has heard Sarah mention how fun it might be to walk around the mall and shop for some birthday presents for friends. Jamie concludes that Sarah must be mad at her about something. She decides to drive over to Sarah's house to ask Sarah why. When she arrives, Sarah seems cold and preoccupied. Hurt and upset, Jamie begins the conversation by saying, "What's your problem?" Sarah is surprised and puzzled, and she replies, "Nothing." Sarah seems evasive to Jamie. Jamie presses her further. Then why are you acting so weird?" Sarah assures Jamie that she's fine, but she's been concerned about a big physics test that's coming up. She had made plans to go with one of her other friends, Beth, to study together. She tells Jamie that she would like very much to go to the mall, but she can't afford the time away from studying. Her average test grade for the class is too low. "Oh, that's a relief," Jamie said. "Thanks for letting me know. I thought something was really wrong." Jamie made judgments about Sarah's behavior before she had all the evidence. Her perception of Sarah's intentions was wrong. However, she was right in going to Sarah and talking things through. This choice enabled both girls to seek clarification and to listen to each other. Like Jamie, we sometimes make judgments about other people's behavior based on a select amount of information gathered from our own perspectives. We attach meaning to messages, whether verbal or nonverbal, according to various influences in our lives. These influences, when uninformed, can lead us to interpret messages in a very subjective manner. In turn, these interpretations often distract us from the facts and cloud the truth. So, we're going to talk about the stages of perception. Stages of perception. As the example of Jamie and Sarah illustrates, perception is central to the communication process. It is the process of using our beliefs, thoughts, and observations to gather information about our surroundings and other people. Perception influences the way we respond to people and helps us make sense of people, events, situations, and objects. Perception involves the selection, organization, and interpretation of messages. The process happens within seconds when we meet someone, or are confronted by new experiences in our environment. Often these stages overlap. For example, while we are still selecting, taking in our surroundings, we are already organizing every stimulus striking our senses. Then, as we continue to select and organize, we begin to interpret the stimuli and to attach meaning to it. So let's talk about selection. In the first stage of perception, sensory stimulation occurs, and our attention is drawn to specific stimuli. We select a focus. Stimuli are sensations received by our senses. We hear, smell, taste, feel, and see any number of things all in one moment. Okay, so selection is taking in our surroundings. Okay, so the first step is selection. Taking in our surroundings. By our senses. Okay. For example, you might take a walk down a sidewalk in New England one fall morning, feel the chilly wind on your face, see the dried leaves along the road, hear the birds chirping in the trees, smell the wood burning in a fireplace, and taste the gum in your mouth. In order for your brain to deal effectively with the information it receives from your senses, it must ignore some of the stimuli. Imagine you want to figure out if that bird you are hearing is either a blue jay or a cardinal. You will focus your attention in the direction from which the noise is coming. And as you listen closely to the bird, you might not be aware of the taste of the gum in your mouth, nor will you sense the wind upon your cheek. Your eyes move from the leaves to the ground to the limbs in the tree where you think the bird is. Your brain will ignore some stimuli in order to accurately perceive the singing of the bird and possibly locate it. The selection process is guided actively by several influences. Intense, repetitious, and relevant stimuli influence our selection. If someone with a bright green shirt and blue hair walks into a room full of conservatively dressed people, he or she stands out. The bright green shirt and blue hair are intense stimuli. They stand out from the ordinary. We tend to notice the unusual over the expected. Stimuli that are otherwise unnoticeable can attract our attention too if they become repetitious. Have you ever noticed that teachers often repeat the same concept several times? They're trained to do this because researchers know that if students hear a concept several times within a short amount of time, they're more likely to remember it. The steady exposure to the same stimulus can dominate our attention. In order to simplify our world, we often ignore stimuli that don't fit our expectations. If there's a construction site near to where we study, eventually we may be able to shut out the noise so we don't hear it any longer. A friend may walk in and comment, "How can you study with all that noise?" You may respond, "What noise?" You have selected to close out the noise stimuli from the construction site, even though it may be extremely loud to someone else. So we have to choose which stimuli to pay attention to and which stimuli to ignore. So we choose stimuli to ignore. We focus on something, so we ignore everything else. Okay, stage 2 is organization. And like that said a few minutes ago, these can overlap. They don't have to go one at a time. They can be happening at the same time. The next step in the perception process is organization. As our brains accept the sensory stimulation, we want to organize it and make sense of it. Two valuable principles or rules that our brains use are proximity and closure. Okay, so we use two principles. With proximity, we judge that people or messages that are close to one another belong to one another. If we see a man and woman standing together, we question, are they married? Are they brother and sister? Are they close friends? We seek a relationship to make sense of what we are seeing. Okay, so there are two principles. Two principles with organization. One is proximity. If they're close to one another, that they belong to one another. Closeness means they belong. Okay. We're talking about the stages of perception. The first stage is selection, taking in our surroundings by our senses. We choose stimuli to ignore. The second is organization. There are two principles. One is proximity. Closeness means they belong together. I ran out of room. Closeness means they belong together. Okay, and the other principle to organization is closure. Closure is also a means by which we organize sensory stimulation. Closure is an act or process of closing something. If we see a partial circle, our minds try to finish or close the circle. Have you ever listened to a song you like on the radio, but you don't hear the ending because a commercial breaks in? Many of us will try to finish the song aloud in our minds. That action is similar to what our brains do to close or interpret an object. Okay. Finish, let's see, our brains finish incomplete data. We'll just put it like that. If you see a drawing of a partial circle, your brain tries to finish it. If you hear a song on the radio and you don't get to hear the end because of commercial, your brain tries to finish it. So your brain finished incomplete data. In mass communication, many magazines use this concept to get us to repeat the magazine name and establish it in our memories. When a picture is placed slightly over the name of the magazine, we can't see all the letters of the name. Our minds try to establish closure by repeating the name in order to picture the complete name. We create closure, thereby repeating the name to do so. Our brain takes the bits of sensory material we see in our surroundings, combines what we have received with what we can draw from experiences, and identifies it with past symbols, shapes, or likenesses. At this point, we have categorized the stimuli, but we haven't attached full meaning to it yet. We do this in the third step, interpretation and evaluation. So let's talk about the third step. So number 3 is interpretation evaluation. Interpretation, evaluation. Interpretation, evaluation is the third stage in the process of perception. During this stage, we assign meaning to stimuli by evaluating them not only by the stimuli themselves, but also by past experiences and knowledge of certain truths and principles. The process of interpretation and evaluation takes place simultaneously. This is why we are hyphenated in this step. That's why they're hyphenated in this step. In stage 2, we gathered the stimuli and organized it according to similar experiences. In this stage, we apply meaning and evaluate its importance. Our past knowledge, experiences, needs, wants, values, beliefs, and physical emotional status play a role in how we interpret and evaluate the stimuli and decide what it means. Okay. So we use past experiences and knowledge to interpret information. I'm just going to put, we use past experiences and knowledge to help us interpret and evaluate the information. Because perception can be a subjective process, our views concerning the interpretation and evaluation of the stimulus may be different from others experiencing the stimulus with us. Illustrating the three stages of perception. Let's examine a scene that will both illustrate the three-stage process and show how subjective the process can become. Okay. A young boy and his father are sitting in the front seat of their car stopped at a light. The road they are on leads over a bridge that crosses the freeway below. The father, who is the driver, is waiting to turn right onto the freeway ramp. He looks down the access road and notices an object approaching. Selection. So he is using selection. This is what he's choosing to focus on. He considers the proximity of this object to the road and traffic and matches it to a past image of a pickup truck, surmising that a pickup truck is approaching quickly. Okay, so that's organization. Closeness means they belong. Okay, he knew that it looked like a pickup, and it knew it was approaching quickly. He decides not to turn because the truck has the green light and will be crossing in front of him soon. So he's interpreted it, he's evaluated it. His eyes follows the truck as it enters the intersection. Suddenly he hears a loud crashing noise and sees the pickup truck spin sideways. Meanwhile, the young boy is sitting in the passenger seat. He gazes straight ahead, thinking about how late he will be for school if the light doesn't change soon. He looks at the light above him and the objects below. Selection. He realizes the light above him is red, so he's choosing to focus on the light, but notices that the object below, similar to cars he has seen in the past, is moving through the intersection. Organization. Okay. Past experience tells him that the red light is a signal to stop, and that to proceed through the light could mean that an accident could occur. Interpretation evaluation. He jumps in his seat as he sees the car crash into the side of the oncoming vehicle. The father's attention was on the truck, making its way legally through a green light. The son's attention was on the car, making its way illegally through a red light. Both perceptions unite in a common experience of witnessing the collision. The young boy and his father saw the same scene, but due to individual circumstances, responsibilities, and experiences, they each viewed the scene differently. Individually, they used their judgment and then selected stimuli that were important for them to examine. They each organized interpretation and evaluated the stimuli according to a variety of factors. Yeah, I'll do it this way. In your lesson, there's a table. It says the father notices an object approaching. Organization is he realizes it's a pickup truck. Interpretation evaluations, he decides not to make a turn. The son, the selection was the son looks at the traffic light and the objects beneath it. Organization, he notes that the light is red but a car is moving through the intersection. Interpretation evaluation, he knows that proceeding through the red light could cause a collision. Making a chart like this could be very beneficial in identifying the three stages, the three principles of perception. Knowledge of how each person at a scene can view a scene differently is why police and lawyers question as many witnesses as possible when an accident has occurred. Numerous viewpoints can assist in the interpretation of the causes of an accident. Understanding how the selection process works helps us understand how so many people can have different views of an accident. Just because people don't agree doesn't mean that they're lying. Sometimes it means that they just perceive the information differently. The selectiveness of the process also explains why several friends or family members can have different interpretations of a story, each believing the other person doesn't really remember correctly what happened. The reality is that each has a viewpoint of the story, depending upon selective stimuli that drew their attention to the event and convinced them it was important enough to organize, interpret, evaluate, and remember. Even though this discussion labels each step separately, like the table we just saw, all three stages overlap each other almost simultaneously. As one stage is finishing to work, another has already started, so that we have the information needed for us to respond quickly when necessary. So let's review. In this lesson, you discovered that once information is received, we first acknowledge it, which is selection, then categorize it, that's organization, and finally analyze its meaning, which is interpretation evaluation. These three stages overlap one another and often occur almost instantaneously. Okay? Make sure you go back and study your notes. Make sure you understand the stages of perception, and go ahead and answer the questions.